Coach Frank Howard is one of the most colorful figures in South Carolina athletics and retired recently as head coach of the Clemson Tigers. Coach Howard is our guest today on Profile. Hello, I'm Tom Fowler. Our guest today on Profile was head coach of the Clemson Tigers for 30 years, a winning record and a colorful career. Coach Frank Howard is our guest today on Profile. The bashful Baron of Barlow Bend now is one of those few men who become a legend, not just in their home state, but across the country. I'll talk with Coach Howard in a few minutes, but first this look at his life and career. In 30 years of head coaching at Clemson University, the bashful Baron of Barlow Bend has made quite a name for himself. Since 1940, Frank Howard's Clemson Tigers won 165 games, lost 118, and tied 12, making Howard the fourth winningest active coach in the nation when he left the field 4 years ago. At that time, Coach Howard was the dean of American football coaches, having been at one institution longer than anyone else. A hallmark of Howard's success as coach and athletic director were the capacity crowds packing the stands and grass banks of Clemson's Memorial Stadium, called Death Valley. Frank Howard has become one of the nation's most sought-after banquet speakers and clinic lecturers. He has been Atlantic Coast Conference Coach of the Year 2 times and has taken 6 teams to postseason bowl games and won the ACC championship 6 times. Before taking the top post in 1940, Frank Howard served as line coach under Jess Neely from 1931 through 1939. Howard still refers to Neely as coach, for it was at Alabama that Howard played under Neely and head coach Wallace Wade as a 185-pound left guard. During Howard's senior year at Alabama, national sports writers labeled Alabama the Crimson Tide because of their tremendous weight advantage on their line. Howard's nickname, the bashful Baron of Barlow Bend, came from his hometown, Barlow Bend, Alabama, where he was born in 1909 and spent his early years. Barlow Bend is not far from Mobile.
Come on, clean them out. Come on, Jack, clean them out up there, son. Oh, come back, let's do it again.
We've had some fine teams. We went to the Gator Bowl in 49, Orange Bowl in 51, the Gator Bowl in 52, the Orange Bowl in 57, the Sugar Bowl in 59, and believe it or not, in 59 we went to 2 bowls. We went to the Blue Bonnet Bowl. Coach Edwards played in December in 59. And I've been fortunate. I've had some real fine football players. I think boys are bigger and faster today than they ever were, but I can't forget my old boys because I always said it wasn't the coaches, it was the good football players. Some coaches, you hear them say, I did this, I did that, I won this, I won that. They didn't win a doggone one, to tell you the truth. Them good boys they had won them. And frankly, I've ran across a lot of fine athletes and football players in these all-star games I've coached. But the thing that always gave me the most satisfaction in my players was not whether or not they played pro football. I'd rather see them be doctors and bankers and presidents of these different concerns. And believe it or not, I got a lot of boys that's been very successful, and I'm mighty proud of every one of them.
Come on, let's go, boy. Let's go, let's go.
Coach Howard can look back with pride on a series of All-Americans who played in Death Valley. Clemson's first All-American, Banks McFadden, named the nation's most versatile athlete in 1939, played football, basketball, and track. All-American Bobby Gage, Clemson's all-time passing leader with a 4-year total of 2,448 yards. Jackie Calvert won All-American honors as a safety in 1950, a year in which Clemson rushed for a school record of 2,800 yards. Other Howard-coached All-Americans have included Joe Blaylock, 1940-41, tackle Lou Corleone, 1959, tackle Wayne Mass, 1966, and guard Harry Oshefsky, a member of the 1967 squad. That same year, Buddy Gore was named ACC Player of the Year. Howard's longtime rival and friend, Coach Bear Bryant of Alabama, has known the bashful Baron for many years.
I've known Frank Howard since about 1932, and I consider him a warm personal friend now. It wasn't always that way. He's used me as a whipping boy in his stories over the years, which I get a lot of kick out of too. But actually, when something happens here, well, he's the first to write a letter and congratulate me or something. I recall a couple of instances that was quite funny. One was back in '51, I believe, when Carney Lashley and I were coaching one side, and Frank Howard and one of his assistants, Mac Millen, was coaching the other side of an all-star team down in San Antonio, Texas. And it was hot. I mean, it was some kind of hot. And we were riding out to practice together this day, and it was on about a Thursday or 2 days before the game, and we practiced at the same time. And Frank asked me, he said, "What are you going to do today?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, I hadn't thought much about it, so let's go out in pads." I said, "Okay, we'll go out in pads." And so we got out there, and our players were already out in shorts, and it was hot. So I told Carney that we'd call them in and had put pads on them at that time. Well, we'd probably have a very poor practice, and we just left them alone. And Franks came out in full gear. Anyway, he's up at one end of the field, and we were on the other end practicing. And I got the manager to go in. They was having a fair or something then, to find some kind of canvas that we could use as a shelter for shade, and told him to get a big tub from the concession here and there, and a lot of Coca-Cola and ice cream and stuff, and bring it out just over on our side of the 50-yard line. So he did, and I hollered down, walked up with a coat and hollered down to Carney. I said, "What are you doing down there?" He said, "We just practiced." I said, "Well, come on up here, let's have a party." Nobody do that but some Simon Legree like Frank Howard. And of course, he was listening to that right over the... So our kids came running up, and they started just on one side of the 50-yard line having such a good time. And he was getting madder and madder, and his neck was turning red, and he was scrimmaging right there. And directly he came over and shook his fist right in my face and says, "I'll tell you one thing." He says, "We'll whip you Saturday night, you blankety blank, and if we don't get you Saturday night," he said, "I'll personally do it." I think he meant it. Well, anyway, the kids got a big kick out of it. Another time we were playing him at the University of Kentucky, and I forgot, I think it was the following year, I forget, the first time and the only time we ever played him while we were at Kentucky. And I asked him what time he wanted to work out today before the game, and he told me a time. So I set our time an hour before his, and where we wouldn't have any conflict. And we were out there going through our stuff, say at 2 o'clock, and he's due at 3. And lo and behold, I hadn't been out there 5 minutes. I look up, and here he comes with his entire squad. Came right on out in the middle of us, and came over to me, and we shook hands, and he hollered, "Hey, Joe, hey, Jim, here come 2 big linemen over there." And I didn't know, I was going to introduce him to me or something. And he looked at me and said, "Now tell them what you said about them." Well, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether they're going to whip me or what they're going to do, but it really got away with me. Of course, Frank, in my humble opinion, has meant a lot to football, particularly football here in the South as we know it. And I've heard a lot about that holler up there at Clemson. We've been in there a couple of times and very fortunate to get out. And he's, I'm glad he's out from a personal standpoint where I don't have to play against him. And of course, I hope that our paths cross often.
Nearly every morning, Coach Howard and friends meet for coffee at a restaurant near the campus.
Well, you know, when I first came to Clemson, it wasn't exactly like this. I used to have to sell the tickets, coach football, track, line off the field, sweep the floors, work in the canteen when the regular man went to lunch. But it's quite different now. I just sit around over here at the Holiday Inn every now and then and take me a good sip of that coffee. And I might add that, Mr. Inslee, your coffee is mighty good over here at the Holiday Inn. And I want you to also know this little girl here, Suzanne, usually serves this coffee to me, and she brings me a big old glass of water and a cup of coffee. Suzanne is the hostess over at the Holiday Inn, and she's getting her PhD at Clemson. Now, y'all notice I didn't say PhD. I thought she said PhD when she told me. I asked her what that PhD meant, and she says, Coach says, that means putting husband through. Is that what you've been doing around here, Suzanne?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. You can say more than yes, sir, can't you? Well, when I first came here, they had 3 little girls around here, and that was the only girls on the campus. One of them was Liberal Bradley, the other one was Virginia Lewis and Jean Foy. Might add, Jim, you know, Mac Folger married Jean Foy, and he owns about everything around Clemson now. Yeah. And they were known as the Yard Indians. Now, though, we got all those little pretty co-eds up here. And I'll tell you one thing, it makes that recruiting a lot easier than it used to be. We used to bring a boy in, and as soon as practice was over, we had coaches to go to different stations. One went to the bus station, another one went to the railroad station. I think we knew pretty well what was coming in on the telephone lines and on the Western Union. That was before the days it was illegal to bug, you know. And we had to keep up with which boy was leaving. In fact, we had 3 teams, one here, one coming, and one going most of the time. And those was the rough days, and I think really most of it was due to the fact that we didn't have co-eds to keep them around here. Boy, they'd take off every weekend, and they'd have to go to bed at 8:30, and they got up about 5:30 and did all those kind of things. But it's a lot better now with all those pretty little girls roaming around. Duck, you remember those days, don't you? This Doug Lindsay, he's the big architect around Clemson now. You gonna build me a new house out on the lake?
Now that you're retired and got plenty of money, you can do that.
Wait a minute, you made a mistake. I'm not retired. I'm going to sell that kickoff. I'm not going to lay around here and on the vine and shrink up and die. I'm going to be out and after them.
Angela said that it's good to hear you tell all these football stories, but I don't know that they know a whole lot about your home life. You go way back to your daughter was young. You went home one day at lunch, and she was up under the house. And Anna said, Frank, Alice is under the house. Go under there and get her for me. I haven't been able to get her out all morning. You went crawling up under the house. When you got just about to Alice, she says, Daddy, is Mama after you, too?
I don't know whether that ever happened, but it's so good. Let's kind of play like it did. That's about the way it is. This house, you know, my wife and I built it in 1951, and frankly, when I'd stayed here 20 years before I ever built a house. And after we built this place, I was kind of scared to plant any flowers because those were shaky years, kind of, and I didn't know whether I'd ever see those flowers bloom or not. You know, this dog of mine, old Rufus here, I tell you, that's some dog, that Rufus is. He's about 14 or 15 years old. He's an older dog than I am a man, tell you the truth. And Jack Valentine down at Cope, South Carolina, gave him to us as a little puppy. And I'll tell you, old Rufus is a coon dog, and he's a good one. And nobody comes in close to my house at night unless old Rufus sounds off. And it's kind of scary to hear him bark and all. Now, inside here, we got a lot of different little trophies and all that we've accumulated over the years. But the thing I'm just about the most proud of is my 100th victory. That 100th victory came in 1958. And we had just enlarged our stadium. We'd beaten North Carolina. That night we was going to a party with Governor Hollins and a lot of dignitaries. And I never will forget coming in. About that time, my son Jimmy had started being a high school football player. And frankly, my wife never talked about football around the house until Jimmy started playing. Then as soon as he started playing, she got to be an authority right quick on football. She'd tell me all about it. And I remember coming in after that 100th victory, I was feeling good. We was going to go out and have dinner with the governor. My wife looked at me, and I thought she'd grab me around the neck and kiss me because we had the biggest crowd we'd ever had here. We'd just beaten one of Jim Tatum's good teams. And she looked at me, instead of hugging me and kissing me and telling me how good we looked and all, and she'd gotten to be an authority, on football. She looked at me and she says, "Look here, Frank," said, "this pass defense has got to improve." Well, that's the way wives are. They know a little bit about your business, and they think they know everything. Well, I came to Clemson in 1931, and Clemson today is quite different than it was in 1931. In 1931, we had about 850 boys. Today, we got about 10,000 students. And I hadn't kept up with the exact number recently, but we do have 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 co-eds. And I'll tell you right now, those co-eds add something to the college. Now, it's one thing I'd just like to say a little about is that office showers we used to have in the old textile building. Boy, without a doubt, those was the worst showers. You had to beat the rust out of them every day. That was just one of my jobs. When I first started, I coached track. I was the trainer. I sold ads on the blotter. I swept the gymnasium. I lined the tennis courts. Bob Jones and I repaired shoes every summer. And I mean, we washed them and polished them and all those kind of things. I also sold the football tickets. And believe it or not, to the best of my calculations, and I'm pretty sure this is accurate, I was one ticket short in selling tickets for 9 years. And that's pretty hard to beat. I couldn't figure out what happened to one Clemson, South Carolina ticket when they was $2.40 each. But all in all, I've had a mighty good time here. Clemson's been mighty good to me. I've met a lot of fine people. I'm in good health. I'm enjoying life. And I just wished I could start back like we did in 1931 and come through all that rough period again. It was really fun. Death Valley was built in 1941, along about that time. And our first game was played against Presbyterian College in 1942. I remember way back yonder, they hung the gates at 1 o'clock, and we started playing PC at 2 o'clock. Now, this stadium took a little while to build. The original, I think, 20,100 seats, right in that neighborhood, cost about $125,000 in 1941. Now, the stadium itself at the present time seats about 44,000 people. We have had, I think it is 53,000 in to see us play either South Carolina or Alabama. We put those people on the bank, and I usually told them that those sections on the bank, the tickets on the bank, was in section GG. Somebody asked me one day what that GG meant. I told them that meant green grass. But this is a fine stadium. I hope someday to see it enlarged, but at the present time, I don't feel like it needs any enlarging. I also don't feel like it needs AstroTurf. It cost $1 million, and up here, I don't believe we could afford that $1 million right at the present time. Up at the end here, we got a rock. It's Mr. Jones was out in Death Valley, California several years ago, and he brought this rock here and gave it to me. It laid around the office about 2 or 3 years, and one day I got disgusted looking at it, and I told Gene Williman, I said, Williman, do something with this rock. And I thought he was just going to take it out there and throw it on the hill, but he went out there and he built a right attractive place. It got to the point where, you know, you'd do anything to try to get boys to play better. And I remember one day that I wasn't too sure whether we was going to win or get humiliated. I told our boys, I said, now all of you that's 100%ers, I said, you go there and rub that rock as you go down the bank, and it'll give you super strength. And, of course, I said something like that, just try to put a little life in them, or be a little different. And some smart newspaper man, I imagine it was Herman Helms, I don't know who it was, but they put in the paper about boys rubbing that rock. I got a letter from a lady over in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, and boy, she got after me pretty good. She said I ought to be believing more in God and not rocks, and I'd win more. Well, anybody with any common sense ought to know I didn't really think that rubbing that rock would help a great deal, but it did relieve the tension, and the boys got to really liking it.
Coach Frank Howard, our guest today on Profile. We'd like to thank WIS Television in Columbia for their early film of Frank Howard's coaching career. And our thanks also to the television centers of both Clemson University and the University of Alabama for their film support. Coach Howard, good to have you here.
Well, thank you, Tom. It's always nice to be in Columbia now. I didn't used to think that way, however.
Well, next Monday you'll be 65.
65 years young.
5 years young, and you'll retire this June. If you can look back, I'm sure a lot of folks will be wondering, what are you doing now up at Clemson, now that you aren't coaching?
Well, I go around the country and make a lot of talks, different kind of organizations. I'm available most of the time. I also selling this Kickoff. It's a football prediction published in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And it's funny how that thing sells. A fella either wants it or he doesn't want it. I go in, I don't give him that high-pressure sales pitch. I said, well, you like some of these? He said, yeah. I said, sign your name here. He said, no. I said, goodbye, I'm glad to have seen you. It's almost that simple, really, and I'm having a good time with it.
Coach, we know you don't like to be accused of bragging. You call it confessing, but you have achieved a lot of honors over the years, including that Hall of Fame jacket you wear there.
Well, this is my 4th Hall of Fame jacket, I believe. 4th Hall of Fame. I've been in the Helms Hall of Fame, the South Carolina Hall of Fame, the Alabama Hall of Fame, and the Clemson Hall of Fame. And I just got one more to go. I doubt if I ever make it. That's the Football Coaches Hall of Fame.
I wonder if you can look back over your career, if you can find one outstanding win or a highlight, something which you can look back on as the high point of your career.
Well, we've had so many fine wins and all it, and had some ugly defeats, too. And I got to the point where I got a lot of humility, believe it or not. But I expect one of our first wins was one that I felt the most. It was up against Boston College. I believe it was 1941, long in there. And we won. I believe the score was about 28-14. It was a close game. And anyway, that night after the game, Hoke Sloan, 2 or 3 more good Clemson people, we were walking around Boston. And I'm telling you the truth, I was so happy and enthused that it didn't feel like my feet was hitting the ground. It looked like every time they went down, they'd jump up, you know. It kind of reminded me of the first letter I made at Alabama in football. We didn't get our jackets until the summer. And they were big old heavy jackets, A-Club, you know, back in 28. But, you know, I wore my sweater, jacket, whatever you call it. I wore it around Mobile in the summertime, just burning up. We've had a lot of other good victories. I expect one of the best games we ever played was probably in the Bluebonnet Bowl in 1959. In fact, we had one pass there. We were scoring so regular off it. And I liked the other coach, the TCU coach, Abe Martin. And I sent word out there. I said, quit throwing that pass. I said, we don't want any more scores. You used to could protect buddies, you know. We can't do that now. They'd call it fixing. But we used to do things like that all the time. If you're playing a fella you liked, you got a comfortable lead and just played the boys that couldn't play so well. You could do all kind of things. But I also remember the Orange Bowl game in '51 down there, where we humiliated them. I think it was 15 to 14. That's a pretty good win. We've had a lot of them. I can't recall all of them.
Football teams today, they seem to be all chartering jets, flying from one place to another in convenience and luxury. Well, how was it like in those early days when you had to travel?
Well, in the early days, we rode the Greyhound. We went through the country in private cars. In fact, we didn't have any long trips, but around '47, I remember the first airplane trip the team took, also my first airplane trip. We was going to Boston, but later on we started chartering planes, going all over the country, playing out in Houston, New Orleans. Going down to play in New Orleans, you know, that plane goes just about right over Barlow Bend. And I remember back there, we was going over, every time we went over where I thought Barlow Bend was, that plane started going up and down, you know. I'd tell those boys, I said, buckle your seat belts, boys. I said, we going over Barlow Bend, that rough, tough country where I came from. And I said, they know I'm up here, and they just, that hot air's coming up. And we had a good time going to Jacksonville, Miami, Boston, all around the country. And I think we helped advertise Clemson University, and I think perhaps some students come there just because they knew they had a good football team.
Coach, how has the game of football itself changed since the first time you took on a team in Alabama?
Well, when I started down there at Alabama, everything was a single wing back. That is, single wing back past the 40-yard line. Until the 40-yard line, you used punt formation. You kicked on first, second down. When you got to the 40-yard line, you went into the single wing, tried to score. Everything, as I said, was a 7-man line, no trap plays, very few passes. I don't remember them working on pass defense when I was in school at Alabama. Now it's a whole lot different. They got wide receivers. They got the T formation, most all teams have. And on defense, you see anything. You see a 4-man line, you see a 3-man line, a 5, 6, 7, sometimes an 8. And they conceal the pass defense so that a lot of times you don't know what they're playing. As a rule, though, they got 4 men back, and they might rotate one way or the other. In other words, one of those corners will stay there, and there'll be 3 deep ones. Sometimes you see the 4-man rush. You see 5 men, short men covering man-to-man. You see 2 deep ones covering zone. The biggest thing, I think, in football, though, has been the line splits. Those line splits give you a lot of trouble.
Coach, thank you. That's all the time we have. Our thanks to Coach Frank Howard, our guest today on Profile. Next week, our profile guest, Governor John C. West. I'm Tom Fowler. Good day.